Hi, this is Gene Monterastelli, the editor of TappingQA.com, and today I have an interview with Rues. In this interview, Rue and I talk about sensitive temperaments. These are people who experience the richness of emotion in a very profound way all day. Now, there's some real positives to this, and there are also some struggles with this. And so what we do is we talk about what exactly sensitive temperament is and how we can use tapping and EFT to find some relief to make each day more enjoyable. Remember, you can check out this audio and well as over 100 more at tappingqa.com/podcast. I hope you enjoy this interview with Rue. During this interview, Rue makes a really interesting statement. What she says is that people who are drawn to any of the tapping protocols are typically people who are very involved in not only taking care of themselves, but also taking care of those around them. And that might seem really obvious on the surface, but because of that, more than likely, if you're listening to this right now, you would qualify as what Rue would call a sensitive temperament. Now, on the surface, that might seem like a bad thing or a big deal. But as you're about to hear, you're going to find out that having a sensitive temperament is really something that's a true blessing and can be used to really appreciate the richness of life. And I have a warning on this particular interview. The sound level isn't super high, so you might need to turn up the interview just a little bit to be able to hear it really clearly. So to start with, I simply ask Rue, what does she mean when she's talking about sensitive temperament?
Well, when you are highly sensitive, you are somebody who grew up always being told, oh, you're so sensitive, you take things in so deeply, you just should let things roll off your back. What's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? Why can't you be more like me or like them? So you're somebody who feels things more deeply than most people do, and you can't hide what you feel as a rule. I've seen statistics that range from 1% to 20% of a population has a highly sensitive temperament. So I don't know where the actual number is, but we're in the minority. I'm a highly sensitive person, and I'm guessing that most of the people who are listening to this would be on the scale of having a highly sensitive temperament as well, because most people who are in the healing area or who have interest in healing, and most people who have deep issues, particularly chronic issues, have a highly sensitive temperament, and lots of people don't realize that, but once they begin to learn about it, they recognize themselves. So it's people who are very empathetic. They are always aware of what other people are feeling. Their feelings might be easily hurt by criticism or even a look that kind of pierces the soul. And then after that, you keep thinking about what happened and what you might have done wrong and what you should have done instead. Highly sensitive people feel other people's suffering really deeply, and so it's difficult to watch the news or to see sad movies. It's hard to move out of feeling anxious and depressed once you're in that feeling. Often for a highly sensitive temperament, they're not comfortable in large crowds or a hectic environment or where there's a lot of noise or even strong smells, and it's easy to get overwhelmed when there's a lot going on. Highly sensitive people are almost always perfectionists. They really want things to be done right, and they drive themselves to get them done right, and they want to be really helpful. Often they are born into families that are very social, practical, industrious, but the highly sensitive person would be often, not always, but often quiet and imaginative and thoughtful and creative. And so they grow up in what feels like an alien environment to them, and they think that there must be something wrong with them, and in fact, people around them sort of reinforce that. But really the best qualities of a sensitive temperament are deep and powerful intentions to foster goodness in the world. They usually feel a strong mission to bring peace in the world, and they have a strong sense of idealism, really high standards, a love of unity and oneness, and a deep sense of joy and beauty, real strong sense of connection with nature. So that, I think, is the intention of the sensitive temperament, is to foster, as I said, foster goodness in the world.
And so it sounds like with, I guess, almost any sort of disposition that we have to the world, that having a highly sensitive temperament seems to be a real double-edged sword, that it gives you the opportunity and the disposition to really recognize the richness of what's in life around us, but at the exact same time, because of that heightened sense of the richness, there's also the possibility to really internalize the suffering that's experiencing around us and to carry that out in a really profound way. Is that accurate?
Yes, very well said. I couldn't have said it better. You should write all that down.
So it sounds like, from the outside, when you started describing the highly sensitive temperament, you talked about oftentimes these type of people are described from the outside, from others in their life, that they're too sensitive and they need to change. What it sounds like is, as you described the positives as well as some of the struggles that come with this temperament, it doesn't seem to me that we would then be wanting to be in a circumstance where we're trying to change our temperament because we don't want to lose the richness and the appreciation of the world and our ability to feel deeply for others. But there needs to be a way that we're able to manage that strong emotion so that we're able to function in a way where we're not carrying around all of this emotion, all of this burden from all of those around us. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's really accurate. And it's interesting. I've just written a book, my second book, about the highly sensitive temperament, which is going to be published by Gary Craig and Dawson Church of the Energy Psychology Press. And Dawson Church, the publisher himself, after he read the manuscript, said that he was surprised. He's just publishing this book because it's a good topic and there is probably use for it. But he said when he read it himself, he realized that over his life he has taken all kinds of self-help training to try to toughen himself up. And he understood suddenly, reading the manuscript of my book, that in fact he didn't have to frame this as wrong. This is a really good, positive, strong, powerful attribute for a person to have, and it's really important to recognize that and instead of continually making yourself wrong for being so sensitive, or even going to a psychologist or a therapist where they call it shy or reclusive or other terms. Social anxiety is another term that we often get labeled with as sensitive people. So I think the thing that EFT can do best, in the way I use it with sensitivity, is to enhance and strengthen the good qualities in the person's awareness of the goodness of those qualities, while helping them to reframe the apparent criticisms that people who don't understand the temperament are labeling sensitive people with.
With that being said, could you talk about that a little more specifically and maybe actually talk about it in two parts? Could you talk about specifically how you use EFT to help someone with a highly sensitive temperament really appreciate the gift set that they have? And then after spending a little time with that, can you do just the opposite in talking about how we can use EFT to manage some of the struggles that come along with doing that?
Okay, big question. Both of those two parts are each in themselves big questions.
Right, and maybe just give some examples and some concrete ways that folks who have started to self-identify as they've heard the description you've given so far and have just kind of, I'm sure people are just going, that all rings true, it finally makes sense. Now how do I use EFT to help myself with this?
Yeah, well, let me take a step back and say actually a good way to start with somebody who's highly sensitive is to work with physical symptoms that they might be experiencing, because it's my experience that a highly sensitive temperament person often has, by the time they're in their, say, 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond, they probably might have a chronic condition of some sort, pain emotionally or pain physically. And that's because being so sensitive, they often grow up in an environment where it's not safe or appropriate to express who they really are or express the emotions that they're feeling. And so they stuff those emotions down inside, and eventually the pain in those emotions, which can't be expressed, come out in physical symptoms. And so almost always when I am working with a client who has a chronic condition, I will begin with their physical symptoms and then move from that to understanding what the emotions are behind those physical symptoms. And they almost always can be expressed in a belief like, there's something wrong with me, I'm too sensitive, I feel so deeply, I am so easily hurt and upset, I'm so open to other people's emotions. And behind that, as I said, there's always sadness and anger and maybe shame and humiliation, and sometimes fear too. So in tapping with somebody, sometimes a good approach for anybody really, but particularly with a sensitive temperament, it might be a good idea to start with how that temperament is showing up buried in the body through symptoms. And then as we work towards, people rarely come as a client to a practitioner saying, I'm too sensitive, help me become less sensitive. They don't think about it that way normally unless they know about sensitivity as a temperament. But as we begin to get into the work and I begin to talk with them about how their physical symptoms and their emotional symptoms are signs of the fact that they are more deeply sensitive than most people, we might tap for instance, even though I worry that I'm too sensitive. And then I would like to reframe that. So I might, at the beginning, I might say, as a tapping phrase, even though I worry that I'm too sensitive, and I notice more details than other people, or I feel socially awkward because I'm not good at small talk, I might take whatever they're offering me, as you do in an EFT setup, and then after saying something like, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway, and I really like sticking that word anyway in there, I might add something like, I love that I'm intuitively aware of what other people are thinking and feeling, or I think that being sensitive is a great early warning system. You might say, even though I feel so deeply and being so sensitive makes me fearful, or I don't have good boundaries because I seem to become the other person and I don't know where I end and somebody else begins, and that makes it confusing for me in the world, then I deeply and completely love and accept myself anyway, and I appreciate that I can step into another person's shoes, or I appreciate that I have a richer set of experiences than some other people might, and I trust my own feelings as my own guidance system. That, I think, is the best blessing of being a sensitive person. Well, one best in a series of best.
Right.
That our emotions are our real guidance system. And a sensitive person, when they are allowing and opening to their emotions, have just the most finely attuned guidance system possible.
And so it sounds like in that description that you do a lot what I like to do as well with those sense of reframes, of going from where the obstacle is to naming really specifically where the blessing is. And so when I'd asked the question originally, I'd asked about doing, the struggles and then talking about the blessings. And so it sounds like to me that when you're tapping with this sort of stuff, that you're consistently moving back and forth between the two of them, that it's not that I'm just dealing with where this can be difficult for me in my daily life and do that for a while and then go, well, this is what the real blessing is. But balancing the two off of each other, and in doing that helps the healing process.
I don't think there's any rules, and so sometimes I would start out with the negative and beliefs and experiences and go with that for a while and then shift to positive. But generally the way my mind works, just personally, I like to take a negative belief or negative experience and then ask myself inside, what could be good about this? What could this be doing for me? And then I just creatively and imaginatively work that into the EFT setup phrases and the tapping phrases. And then I always ask people as I'm doing that, I just say, this is what's coming to me. This is my imagination. If this isn't true for you, don't just say it. Embroider it, change it, delete it, replace it with your own phrases. But if it feels true for you, let's explore it.
Now, what I've worked with clients, and I get feedback when we talk in the next session, we've been talking about the homework they've been doing. My clients have a tendency to be really good at naming the things that are struggles for them, and they have a much harder time on their own, particularly at the beginning, being able to do that reframe and name some of the blessings that come from any particular struggle. Because I think when we face almost any struggle, we're going to be able to find those reframes in there. Could you give some more examples that you have found with your clients and yourself from highly sensitive temperaments that might be helpful for folks who struggle to come up with some of those reframes?
Okay. Actually, I had a session this morning before you and I began talking where the person that I was working with just consistently found herself falling into the negative, even though we would be trying to reframe. And so I actually invited her to stand up while this is a phone session, stand up and to imagine that there were two circles on the floor, and one of them was all the yes buts that she came up with, all the negative comments. And then the other circle, I asked her to imagine that was all the positive things that she could possibly think of using the phrase yes but or what if in a positive way. So she stepped into the left circle and she would say all the negative things that she could think of, and then I would ask her to step into the positive circle and to say yes but and what if for positive things instead, and go back and forth until she could untangle or disentangle all the yes buts and what ifs in her mind, so that her body really had an experience of separating the positive and negative. And then I asked her to step to a third circle where she could look back at those two other circles, the negative and positive, and see that they were choices in her mind rather than her whole identity being this entanglement of yes buts, that whenever she thought of something positive, she had to think of something negative. So, and then we sort of kind of invented a tapping routine where she would tap one point in the negative circle, and then she'd step over to the positive circle and tap on another point something positive, back and forth. So that was a really interesting experience for her. It really made a lot of sense, and it got her the awareness in her body that she really could make choices about this. Just to be specific, because you asked me to be specific.
Yeah, please.
The kinds of things that might be in a positive circle or in your mind as a positive reframe. For instance, there are lots of different things, but I'll just read off. I have a list here that sometimes I look at when I'm thinking about this. In fact, this is a list that came from a group of people that I was doing a workshop with. I asked them for what they liked least about being sensitive, and then I asked them for what they liked most about being sensitive. So some of the things that they said that they liked most are, I'm intuitively aware of what another person may be thinking or feeling. The one I said earlier about being sensitive is a great early warning system. It's good guidance for me. Being so empathic makes me very understanding. I can step into another's shoes. I can see and sense to the heart of a matter. I'm deeply attuned to beauty. The poetry of everything comes through. I have a deep connection with spirit. I have a richer sense of experiences that I can draw on. I have a different, more finely tuned sense of humor that goes deeper and is more readily available. I can see the beauty in almost anything, and I can see wholeness always everywhere. Those are some things. And
that's a beautiful list.
I have another list that's even better. Let me share a few of those. One of the things I like to do when I'm tapping on sensitivity particularly is instead of saying, even though this problem, like we usually do in EFT, something I love doing and will often throw into an EFT session on any subject is go into saying, especially because, and so I'll read off again some of these that I have written down, especially because I love that I'm so sensitive. I choose to deepen and expand my sensitivity in even more powerful and wonderful ways.
I love that. That's a great phrase.
And another one, there's several here. I have 4 or 5 that I could read off.
Please do.
Especially because I love that I'm so sensitive, I hunger for deep and meaningful relationships. And I make creating and maintaining a good and satisfying relationship with myself my first priority. Especially because I love that I'm so sensitive, I have a mission of bringing peace into the world, and I choose a mission of bringing peace into my own life. I deserve this. Especially because I love that I'm so sensitive, I choose to stand up for myself and express who I am with love and a light heart. Especially because I love that I'm so sensitive, I choose to love and appreciate and honor this world-changing soul quality that I embody. The world needs what I have to offer. I am ready to be more.
Those are wonderful.
I think they're wonderful
too.
too.
And I really like that, especially because reframe at the beginning. That's really very, very beautiful. I think it adds a lot there.
I think in EFT we often tend to focus on what's wrong.
Yeah.
Even though we have that phrase at the end, I deeply and completely love and accept myself, but often it seems to me that it becomes a kind of a throwaway, automatic, rote thing that we say.
Right.
And I like to really explore and deepen into it because I think that's where the healing is.
Wow, that's great. So, kind of final takeaways. What are the important things that we should keep in mind if we realize that we have a highly sensitive temperament, or we realize that we have some people in our life that have highly sensitive temperaments that we're trying to support and care for?
Oh, I'd like to offer 4 ideas that are basically reframes of sensitivity that we can hold as possibility for ourselves or anyone in our lives, particularly our children. I think it's so important to understand that when we have a child who is sensitive, that we not hold them in fear and anxiety of our own, that comes from our own experience of being sensitive in the world, but that we hold them in the trust and the confidence that they're here to be the way they are on purpose, and that we trust them to be able to figure out what they need and grow into the strength and confidence of who they are. So the first reframe that I want to hold for myself and for the world is, instead of thinking of myself or other people as too sensitive and too easily overwhelmed, I want to honor the profound awareness of sensations that is available to me as a sensitive person. I'll just talk about myself here, and anybody can generalize to themselves if it feels relevant. Another good thing to keep in mind about myself and other people is the aspect of sensitivity that you might call, that a psychologist might call, compulsive helping. People who are highly sensitive are so tuned in to what's needed in a situation or in the world that, and we're so idealistic and can see solutions, that we fall into being addicted to helping. And often we grew up in families where we had to be the one to make it all right. And so we grew up thinking that that's the way that we're supposed to be in the world. We are compulsive, addicted helpers. So I want to step back from that and to understand that deeply within that intention is a real mission to bring peace. And it's not useful in the world unless I can bring peace to myself and find out what makes me happy, what brings me into a feeling of flow and blessing. And when I am in that state of being, then I automatically bring peace to whomever I'm around in whatever situation I'm involved in. And I don't have to change the world. Often a sensitive person, I think, feels like they have to change the world so that it's a safe place for them to be in. And it took me a long time to recognize that and to disconnect from that and to learn how to put myself as my priority, peace in my own life. Then the third issue is the issue of boundaries. Where do I leave off and another person begin? And how do I function in a world where I am so connected to oneness? How do I become an individual? How do I draw my energy field around myself and protect myself? And so for me, the reframe there is to honor my deep ability to connect with another person, with an issue, with an animal, with trees, with the world. And so to put my attention on my ability to connect with myself, first of all, and then use myself as the portal through which I can connect with other people and the world, rather than what we tend to do because we haven't had models for doing it in any other way, which is go out of myself to be in other people and try to figure out from inside them how I should be in the world in the best way to bring peace and ease. And so using my deep sense of connection to connect with myself first of all and ground myself in the world. And then the fourth reframe about sensitivity that's important to me is that sense of perfectionism that people who are sensitive fall into. They become very self-critical. We drive ourselves to make things right, usually because we were born into families where we were seen as wrong, and so we're always trying to get the approval of other people. So what I want to do is to honor in myself the sense of idealism and beauty that is natural in me because of my sensitivity, and my ability to envision possibilities. and to also to trust in goodness. And again, bring that all back to myself so that I can counter the self-criticism with a sense of ease and trust in my own goodness, and then just know that that radiates out from me and makes a viable force for good in the world. So just coming back to the four main things: sensitivity and overwhelm, trusting in my awareness of my profound awareness of sensations, instead of compulsive helping, trusting in my ability to bring peace to myself and therefore the world, the boundary issues, trusting in my own deep sense of inner connection, and perfectionism and self-criticism, trusting in my own goodness and my ability to envision possibilities.
And it sounds like a real key point of that fourth part is also understanding the sense that we talked about at the beginning, that this isn't just something that's simply a burden, that there truly is blessing inside of having this sort of disposition.
Oh, I think it's absolutely a blessing.
Yeah.
And I think that sensitive people are kind of the canary in the coal mine. You know, back in the coal mining days, probably people are familiar with this metaphor, the canary was sent down into the coal mine to see if the air was breathable for humans.
Right.
And if the cage was pulled back up and the canary was dead, they didn't send humans down there. And I think in a way, sensitive people are the barometer for what's toxic and difficult and challenging and wrong in the world. I think we can sense those things more quickly than most people, and we need to learn how to take care of ourselves and be way showers. I think that there is a blessing for the sensitive person in the world, that the sensitive person is a blessing in the world as a way shower. And that's the way I always want to honor it.
Good. Well, thank you very much for sharing your time today, Rue.
You are welcome, Gene. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.